They say some of the best journeys, you bring about some of the most interesting travel companions. And I have to say right now, listening to your talk and everything, you guys are some interesting traveling companions. Yeah, because I couldn't think of any more interesting travel companions than you for somebody like me. You know, when I grew up, my father was a career Air Force officer. And I call myself a child of the Cold War. And back then, terms like Killikami for mommy were real. Better dead than red was real. It was part of my life, 24/7. Because that's the life we lived. We were on the front lines of the Cold War. Across the frontier was the Soviet enemy, and we were ready to go to war. Not just any war, ladies and gentlemen, a war that would bring about the end of all mankind, because that war would include nuclear weapons. That was the harsh reality of my youth. And sadly, I was ready and willing to go on the same journey that my father did. I enlisted in the Army out of high school. I ended up getting a commission in the United States Marine Corps. And my focus of studies in college was Russian area studies. Why? To know your enemy. Why? To kill my enemy. I'm just being straight up honest with you. I joined the Marine Corps to kill commies. I joined the Marine Corps to kill Soviets. That's all I wanted to do, because I believed that was the mission given to me by my country, by my heritage, by my legacy, to defend America, freedom, our way of life against an evil scourge that I didn't understand, but I feared. So I was willing to kill them. And I did a hell of a job preparing for this operation. 2.5 years in 29 Palms, California, with a field artillery battalion whose job was to put steel on target. And I trained hard, and we were ready. If the balloon went up, we would have acquitted ourselves well. Thank goodness the balloon didn't go up. Instead, they sent me on a different journey. They sent me to the Soviet Union. A guy who was training to kill Soviets suddenly was sent to the Soviet Union not to kill them, but to cooperate with them. On what? Eliminating the most dangerous weapons in the world. In December of 1987, Ronald Reagan sat down with Mikhail Gorbachev and signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. Intermediate nuclear forces are basically missiles with nuclear warheads of a given range. In this case, the range, 500 to 5,000 kilometers, I believe, could be miles, but I think it's kilometers, meant that if the weapon was stationed in West Germany, it could strike Moscow 5 minutes after launch. Why is that important? Well, because that's the amount of time then the Soviets have to decide what to do. The second the weapon is detected, 5 minutes later, if it's the real deal, Moscow disappears. Now, normally speaking, with intercontinental ballistic missiles, you have 30 to 40 minutes. Now, why is this important? Because in the past, the treaty was signed in 1987. In 1983, there were several instances where there were false alarms. And fortunately, the time that was saved by that 30 to 40 minute window allowed people to make the right decision to assume that this wasn't a real attack, but a false alarm, and they didn't launch the missiles. But with the new intermediate range missiles, if the alarm went off, you didn't have 30 to 40 minutes, you had 5 minutes, which means fire now, boom, and we're all dead. We're all dead. Now, I don't like to say this too often, and I appreciate people shaking my hand coming up here. Don't shake my hand for anything I am doing today or tomorrow. Shake my hand for what I did in 1988, 1989, 1990. Want to know why? Because if it wasn't for people like me on the American side and my Soviet counterparts, none of us would be here today.
You're an American hero.
Because without the treaty, there would have been a mistake. And if that mistake, we wouldn't have had time. Decisions would have been made. And I'll give you an example from life. June 1995, a missile was fired from Norway. It was an atmospheric test missile. And when it went up, Russian radar picked it up and determined that it was a Trident submarine-launched ballistic missile coming in on a trajectory designed to fire an electromagnetic pulse, so basically a nuclear bomb in the air, to blind Russian radar for the first strike coming in. This was taken so seriously that the Russian authorities brought the nuclear briefcase to Boris Yeltsin, opened it up and said, put in the launch codes. Now, boss, right now. We have to make a decision right now. Fortunately, because of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, Yeltsin had more than 5 minutes to make that decision. And eventually he said, I don't think this is the attack, we're going to stand down. Had the treaty not been signed, we would have had a completely different outcome. So when I say we all would have died, it's not hypothetical, ladies and gentlemen. We all would have died. None of us would be here today. That's an amazing thing. But you know, perhaps the most important thing about the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty for me wasn't the journey of disarmament. It's very important, life or death, literally, boom. It's a journey of discovery. How do you take somebody who was conditioned to hate a people he knew nothing about to such an extent that he wanted to kill them? And not just kill them theoretically, in close quarter combat, close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. Look them in the eyes while you take their life. That's the kind of hate I had in my soul for the Soviets. And yet they transformed me. You see, I went over there, and instead of trying to kill them, I started working with them. It was an amazing journey to see these people as humans, human beings. You know, initially our work was professional, purely professional. We worked together to build, you know, this monitoring facility. We worked on developing procedures, etc. But you can't be around people 24/7 without getting to see little things about them. That guy's pretty funny. That guy's not. And I'm sure they were saying the same things about us. You know? Looking at the guy next to me going, I like him. Looking at me going, I don't like him. But that's okay. On New Year's Eve, 1988, a senior Soviet engineer named Yegor Yefremov, who used to build the reentry vehicles for SS-25 missiles, those were the missiles that are aimed at American cities, invited me and 3 other inspectors into his home. And in doing so, he opened up his life for us. We got to meet his wife, his kids, his neighbors came over. And anybody who knows anything about life, you don't normally invite people into your house unless you've cleaned it up really good, right? Because otherwise they come in and they get to see the real you. Like if you come into my house and it hasn't been cleaned up, you're going to learn a lot about Scott Ritter. What a slob he is and what dogs do to a home. But then we clean it up, you come in and we put on our best face. Well, in the Soviet Union, you don't have that option. These are small apartments. When you come in, what you see is what you get. It's a very intimate experience, and we got to see everything about this man's life, his family's life, the photographs, the clothes, the bedroom right there, the tiny bathroom. But we also got to see the love that this man had for his family. This is a guy I wanted to kill, and that he loved his wife. How can a man who's an evil communist love his wife? Communists don't love. He has children that he dote on. He loves his children. Communists don't dote on their children. That's an American trait. Friends came over and they told jokes. They made fun with one another. What I learned is that these are fellow humans. And it began a journey where I no longer wanted to kill them. I wanted to like them. I wanted to love them. The fact is, I married one of them. The U.S. government didn't like that. But the point is, I broke down this wall of ignorance. This wall of ignorance, and from that ignorance comes the fear that drove me to do what I was trying to do. But once you learn, once you educate, once you inform yourself, the ignorance is no longer there. It's replaced by knowledge, and the knowledge allows the fear to be eliminated, and you can view things objectively. Amen. And one of the clearest things I've learned from this is that we don't want to go to war with Russia.
Amen. Yeah.
We don't want to engage in a nuclear arms race. Now, we had tried to put these pieces together back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, but we have failed. Somehow we have gotten off track. Today we're in a situation where there's a horrific war in Ukraine. I'm not here to articulate one way or the other on that. I think I've made my point clear where I stand. But the bottom line is it doesn't matter what Scott Ritter thinks. That war is a reality, and that war is going to go the way that war is going to go. What we need to be focused on isn't trying to play, game, we call it a game like a Super Bowl. Russia's on the 40, they're going to go, no, it doesn't work that way, guys. The war's going to end. People are going to die. But when it ends, what do? Where do we go? What journey do we choose to take? And right now, the United States is even more in the dark about the reality of Russia than we were when I was in the Marine Corps. Russophobia is a disease that infects the American people. And from this disease, this fear of everything Russia, is built this ignorance. And this ignorance is exploited by our elected officials to take us on a journey of destruction, of the inevitable elimination of all humankind through nuclear annihilation. That's a statement of fact, ladies and gentlemen. When I started the INF Treaty, it began a process that resulted in numerous treaties with the Russians. But because of Russophobia, we have dropped out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. We've dropped out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. We've dropped out of the Open Skies Treaty. We have one treaty left, Strategic Arm Reduction Treaty, and that expires in 2026. And there's no effort right now to have a replacement treaty. And if that treaty goes, there is no arms control. And if there is no arms control, there's an arms race. And that arms race today will result in the inevitable nuclear conflict between us and Russia, and we all die. That is a statement of fact. I'm here to tell you right now that if we don't get arms control back on the agenda, seriously, we are all going to die sooner rather than later. For anybody out there who's grandparents, I would imagine you want a world that's safe for your grandchildren. There won't be a world for your grandchildren. For your parents looking to your children, there won't be a world for them. And for people who just enjoy lives as themselves, I'm sorry, you're gone too. Life is going to end. And don't care if you're a libertarian, a communist, a Republican, a Democrat, an agnostic, a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim. It doesn't matter. You're all going to die. So if we allow ourselves, as we try to figure out where we're going to be going, to fall apart and squabble, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that. The nuclear genie don't care. He's going to grant you one wish, and that wish is death. We got to keep the genie in the bottle. How do we do that? Ladies and gentlemen, we got to go on a journey. We have to go on a journey of national discovery that replicates the journey I took back on New Year's in 1988. Right. We have to start meeting Russians. We have to start talking to Russians. We have to break down this wall of self-imposed ignorance. We have to learn about them. We have to learn to love them, like them, have compassion for them. And if we don't like them, at least we have to be able to articulate why we don't like them. Because then you can begin to come up with a solution of how to resolve that. You can't solve a problem unless you properly define it first. And what Russophobia does is prevents us from accurately looking at the Russian problem. We're not looking at reality, we're looking at fiction. Fiction that is created by the military-industrial complex on purpose to generate the fear that allows them to continue to build the weapons of mass destruction. It is a business that makes them a lot of money, but in the end is going to kill us all. That's right. So where do we go? We got to go on a journey. Now I'm going to give you a little vision here. A little vision, just a slight vision. First, before a vision, like any vision, you got to go backwards. So journey backwards in time with me to June 1982. Central Park. 1 million people showed up in Central Park in an anti-war rally. Not an anti-war rally, anti-nuclear rally. A pro-arms control rally. Give peace a chance rally. At that time in 1982, the Soviet Union and the United States were not talking about arms control. We had locked each other out. Sort of like what's happening today. We were the evil empire, or they were the evil empire. We were enemy number one. Sort of like today. But when 1 million people came together in a singular voice and said, "We want to live," that was it. We want to live. Yeah. And we're telling our government, we need you to embark on policy directions that will guarantee we live. And their voices were heard. 5 years later, the INF Treaty was signed. 5 years later. So now let's move forward. June 2024. A little bit more than a year from now. We need to put 1 million people or more in Central Park.
Let's go.
We need to put 1 million people in Central Park. We're going to send one message and one message alone. We need to live. We want to live, and we demand of those politicians whose names will be on the ballot in November 2024 that you listen to us, that you don't ignore us, that this is the singular issue. Nothing else matters but our future as human beings, and that future will be terminated unless you put arms control back on the agenda. We're not telling them how to negotiate. We're not telling them outcomes. That's the job of specialists. Trust but verify. That's the old maxim for arms control. Trust but verify. Verification is the job of specialists, people like me, who get into the nitty-gritty. Trust, however, it has to be earned, not given. You can't just assume trust. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no trust between Russia and the United States today, none whatsoever. And that trust isn't just between governments, it's between people. In America, there's Russophobia. We don't know about them, so we fear them, so we don't trust them. In Russia, I'm telling you right now, there's no such thing as American phobia. They know us. They know us very well. They know our history better than we know our history. They know the facts. They know everything. And they don't trust us for a reason. Because we can't be trusted. We violate every treaty we enter. We negotiate in bad faith. That has to end. And it only ends when we tell the people who negotiate in our name that enough is enough. So I'm going to ask you today. Today, you guys, everybody here, you took a big step forward. Thank you. But now let's continue the journey. The next step, the next step, the next step, the next step, and we're going to end up in Central Park in June of 2024, 1 million plus strong, telling our elected officials no to nuclear war, yes to disarmament, yes to life.